Hey YouTube, it's a Real American Brian, and I have a guest with me, and we're going to be going through our reading rainbow of comics for the month of January, so stay tuned.
Yo, Joe. Talking comics, here's your host. It's a Real American Brian.
Hey, so we're back. We're ready to talk about the books we read. Taylor is with me, my brother, who has his own YouTube channel, Taylor Talks Comics, which will be linked to down below. You want to tell us about your channel?
Yeah, so I'm Taylor, and I love talking comics. I like to highlight anything on my channel from mainstream comics down to like smaller press, self-published stuff. And yeah, I think that's it. Love talking comics.
All right. Yeah, he definitely goes more into detail in books than I do on a lot of my videos on my channel, but check it out. There's a lot of good stuff there. But one of my big things for this year, I'm very good at buying books, but wasn't always great at reading the books I bought.
Aren't we all?
Yeah, so this year I was hoping to make some steps into improving in that area. So that's what I did. So far it's going pretty well. So I thought I would do monthly videos like this and go through the books I read and hopefully have guests on, Taylor, as often as he wants to come back on, or anyone else that we can get scheduled. So let's get into it. The first book that I have to talk about is Reckless by Ed Brubaker. Did you tell me about this book? You may have, because I talked to you about Brubaker before. I absolutely loved this book so much. One of the big things with my reading more, I wanted to be reading more, buying less. I thought that would be, if I spent more time reading, I'd buy less. But then I read this book and instantly had to have the next one, so went out and bought the next one.
I was going to ask you if you did.
I did.
So, have you read any Brubaker? I know you're a big fan of the Brubaker Cap run back in the day. Have you read anything besides that?
Some other thing. I have. I don't know offhand, but definitely have.
Okay.
I can't think of anything offhand, but yeah.
Because this is more of what he does now, is like these crime stories for Image.
Yeah, so one of the things I really like about this, like, this wasn't released in single issues, like, this was the format it was released in each time. And then the way I'm reading it, where hopefully one a month, and then I'll go and buy the next one, it kind of feels like one of those book of the month clubs for me personally. Yes. So.
And the format of these is like the old, like, dime paperback crime novels, like you'd like pick up at the airport or what have you. So they purposely wanted to be this format where it's like these OGNs, like this is the only format it's released in. And I've heard people say that they want like a big collection of like oversized of all of them, but like normally I'd err on the side of that. But I love these. I love that they're single individual volumes.
And I agree with everything you just said. I think usually I would want one big huge collection, but this time like this just feels right. This was their intention and they did it very well. But yeah, so just a kind of a modern crime story, I guess. Super cool. I'm looking forward to reading more, and we'll definitely be doing that.
If you get into Brubaker and Phillips, that duo works together exclusively almost. I mean, they are exclusive for Image, but they have all kinds of crime stories to tell that they've told together.
I can't believe the content they put out.
Yeah,
like
it's insane.
The volume that they put out is nuts. Because I mean, just this book alone should keep you busy. But then they have like 2 or 3 other titles that they're just continually churning out.
I mean, they did 5 of these in I think a year and a half. I think 5 of these came out.
And they started this during the pandemic, right? So that makes it a little easier to get things done, I think. But
yeah, because I think that was a story, was that they were trying to think of what monthly title they would do next, but then they kind of wanted to do this format. But they stopped at 5, and now they have some other story coming out now. It's not related to this. But I could read like 30 of these. I hope they go back to it.
I'm trying to pace myself. I don't want to like catch up too quick. So if I can like do one a month, then I think that's ideal for me. But highly recommended. I look forward to reading more.
So the first one I want to talk about is the comic that I'm trying to get everyone in the world to buy this year. It's called Pink Lemonade. And so far... So it's by Nick Cagnetti. He does everything. All the inks, pencils, coloring, lettering, writing, everything. And it actually was originally released in 2 issues for It's Alive Publishing, but then he moved publishers. He'd been shopping around, and that was a couple years ago. So he's finally with Oni Press. And now 5 issues have come out yet so far, and the 6th issue is coming out next month in February. But the first 2 issues... he just reprinted the old material, and then starting with issue 3 is new stuff. So, as you can see, it's like this cover's from Shiki King. It's from Nick Cagnetti. But you can see it's very bright and colorful. It looks like a fun, like, Saturday morning cartoon almost. And it is an all ages title, which one thing I'm trying to advocate for this year is that all ages literally means all ages. I think people assume all ages means kids comics a lot, but so it is an all ages title. There's nothing like that I wouldn't be comfortable with my son reading, but the story is Pink Lemonade here, the main character with this motorcycle helmet. She right away wakes up and doesn't know anything about her past, and she is trying to understand the world around her, so she's kind of like the fish out of water type deal, but she only wants to do good. And that's kind of a theme that I always enjoy, is that like when things are bad around this person, but they only know how to do good. And she becomes like a big fan of this old comic book story, OJ Bot. So it has a lot of nostalgia feels in there too, like this doesn't actually exist, but she like, her and her friends are like really into this old time cartoon that even I think in one issue, they ruined OJ Bot because they made him too serious and dark, and even like mimics like The Dark Knight Returns and like Batman. I don't know if I can find it, but so it's gotten too dark and serious. So they love the classic stuff, and then they're a big fan of OJ Bot. But this whole thing is just like a fun superhero tale where she has like colorful bad guys and these fun characters that you meet. Like there's this mysterious guy with a jetpack and a dog. Just fun comics, and that's what I love about it the most. But the trade paperback for this is coming out this summer, and I'm personally it's my mission to get everyone to buy it so Nick Cagnetti can make more comics. Which I guess I lied. I think someone else is doing the lettering. But regardless, it's mostly Nick Cagnetti, and he's awesome.
Awesome.
So Pink Lemonade.
So is it going to be a continuing series after the trade?
I don't know. He hasn't said anything. But one thing he also likes to do, if you follow him on Twitter, and he even has these classic ads, like you remember, like looks like an ad. And there's this guy in here, Ron Radical. It's like a extreme image guy with a mullet. He's really cool. He hasn't said anything after issue 6, but one thing he does on Twitter a lot is he loves drawing Spider-Man, and his Spider-Man's awesome. So one thing I'd love to see him to do is like an all-ages Spider-Man comic for Marvel that's like not in continuity, just fun for kids. But I don't know what's going to happen after issue 6. I hope it keeps going though.
Cool. Well, yeah, I think I'll give the trade paperback a try when it comes out. So the next one I have is Custom Bind. I got off my shelf and read this month. It is the Snake Eyes title from IDW. This was in the IDW continuity. The Snake Eyes book went through 3 different title changes. Snake Eyes Cobra Command, Snake Eyes Civil War, and Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow. So I collected them all in here, issues 1 through 21, and I'm going to do a whole video on this book and how I made a lot of mistakes with this custom bind. So yeah, that'll be a video to look forward to. So not the best reading experience, but that was my G.I. Joe reading for the month.
So is this like in the IDW continuity, but was it like an origin story, or was it like in the smack dab in the middle of the continuity?
It wasn't an origin. It was in the middle of the continuity, I guess. So they had 3 titles coming out during the bulk of it. This is the Chuck Dixon era. So they had G.I. Joe, Cobra, and then a Snake Eyes book. So you had 3 books a month coming out. And that was during the bulk of this era, actually all this era. So
So I have a gift actually for you.
all right.
So I want to blow your format. I know you have this all formatted, and I want to mess this up for you. But I saw this thing, and I was at Half Price Books. I was literally walking out, and I turned around, did my one last glance. Is there anything else I missed? And I found this thing, and I was like, I have to pick this up for Brian. And one thing that I really enjoy about comics is like the different ways they can be printed or presented. And then you get into like the treasury editions and stuff. I hope you've never seen this before. I hope you don't even own it, but I found this, and I thought you have to have this.
Oh wow! No, I've never seen this before.
So this is a mini comic version of the Silent issue, but also has some other issues behind it. They actually had 2 more of these too there, but that was obviously you had to have that one.
Yeah, I think this is probably a UK version.
There are some Action Force comics in the back. So it collects 21, which is a Silent issue, right?
Yep.
And then 22 is behind that one, and then there's 2 Action Force stories behind that are about Destro, I think.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I've never seen that before.
I know, it's just sitting on the very bottom of the shelf too. It's like, I just turned around and saw it. I was like, whoa, it's a Silent issue. Does the Silent issue say that have that little blurb on the top too? The most unusual comic story?
It does, yeah.
It seemed like a very Stan Lee kind of thing that he would say.
Well, thank you very much. That is awesome.
Yeah, so you have don't you have a treasury presentation of this one?
Not of this one, no.
Oh, okay.
But I have multiple copies of the book different times. But yeah, nothing like this.
And you can see on the spine, it says number 8 on it. So they must have released a whole... I guess it's on the front too. They must have released a whole series of these small versions.
Huh.
But that was a cool little ephemera piece.
Yeah, that's super cool. I'll have to do some research on that. Thank you very much.
Yeah, welcome. But my next read is Akira. I guess it's a manga, so it should go this way. This is from the box set. So, and I've read it before, but this is more of a reread. I don't know if you've seen the box set. You haven't read Akira, have you?
I have not.
You should read it. It's amazing. But it has like a cool little dust jacket here. But Akira is the story of... It's a post-apocalyptic story, but not your typical one. I don't know if you can see the artwork in here, but Katsuhiro Otomo is like an amazing artist. But the story is, so it's post-apocalyptic, I think in the year, I'm going to get the years wrong, but in the late 90s, according in the story, the world, like an atom bomb hits Japan. The story takes place in 2020 though, which is really interesting. It takes place as they're rebuilding a Olympic stadium in 2020, and in a real world 2020, the Olympics were in Tokyo, and we're in the middle of a pandemic, so things are going crazy. I think the Olympics actually took place in 2021 because of the pandemic. But the cool thing I like about this post-apocalyptic story is that it's not... Most post-apocalyptic stories you see, like Mad Max and those kinds of things, are like in the midst of like after the event happened and the aftermath of that. This is 20 years later, so the world's been rebuilt. But it's also kind of chaotic and that kind of thing. The opening scene, if you see the anime the movie is based off of like the first 3 volumes or 6 volumes of this. You can get them in paperback or the box set. Because Otomo was actually the director of the anime, and he didn't have the story finished yet. So the movie's only based off the first 3, and then what he thought would be the end. The ending's a little bit different in the actual manga, but the opening scene is like the famous motorcycle scene you've probably seen, like the motorcycle chase scene, and they are on the run. It's this kid gang. There's a lot of gangs involved, different gangs, so it reminds me somewhat of Warriors, like the movie The Warriors. Okay. But they're just like causing a ruckus. They're teenage boys, and then this kid walks in front of them. They almost hit him, and it turns out this kid is an Esper. And if you've seen Stranger Things, it's kind of like there's like this. They find out that there's just like this factory of kids that they're like doing experiments on, like 11 and Stranger Things. So a little bit of that's going on too. So it's kind of like this mystery unfolding of like who are these superpowered kids? Where are they coming from? Is the government corrupt? Are they involved in it? And then by volume 3. In it, I guess a little bit of a spoiler, but something happens again, the cataclysmic to Japan, to where it's almost then you're seeing like the aftermath of the post-apocalyptic that I was talking about. So it's like the first 3 volumes are like 20 years later, things have gotten better, but they're still a little corrupt. And you see it happen again. It's like, okay, now things are a little bit corrupt. And like they're picking up the pieces by volume 3, or by volume 4, where it's like there's like a power struggle, like gangs versus police versus government, like there are all kinds of things as this new apocalyptic event happened. But in 6 volumes, the artwork is insane, and the story is just like this constant unraveling mystery involved. And the protagonists are people that are like, they start off really kind of not so great people, but you fall in love with them as they learn their lessons about life and that kind of thing, and become heroes. But great comic.
So in that format, there's 6 volumes?
In both formats there are. So the box set comes with 6 hardcovers like this, and this was actually the first time in America that they were printed in the original manga format of, I always get this backwards, right to left, like they are in Japan. Previously, in all the paperbacks you can find, all the phone book ones that, like Dark Horse did some, Kodansha did some, they're pretty easily found and affordable. But those are presented left to right. So if you have like an aversion in manga to reading right to left, you can find Akira in a format that's left to right and be able to read it just fine.
All right. My next book is Fight Club 2. So I'm a big Chuck Palahniuk fan, but when this book came out, I didn't really pay any attention to it. I thought it was kind of silly. I didn't really see the point in having a sequel to Fight Club. So it's been sitting on my shelf for a while now, so I got it down and finally read it during my new plan to read more. Getting into it, there's a lot of different times where I was like, okay, I'm back in this world, I'm having fun. But then there's a lot of, as many other times where I'm kind of rolling my eyes and like, really? Okay, that's what we're doing here. And it is very much, there's a lot of meta to it where Chuck actually appears in the comic and he's running part of the story. So it is interesting. It kept my attention and I enjoyed the read through of it. But it's not going to be held up to his novels and stuff.
And there's a sequel to this, I think, too.
There is. There's Fight Club 3. I'm not super excited to run out and get it, so I guess that's kind of where I'm at with this.
But Chuck wrote these, right?
He did.
Okay.
Yeah, so...
I haven't read these before, and I have read the Fight Club novel and obviously seen the movie. It's always interesting to me that they're like ballsy enough to make it Fight Club 2.
Yeah.
It's like the first people... I mean, I guess if you haven't seen the movie or something, you'd find them like, well, where's Volume 1? But... Because they never did like a comic version of that, did they?
I don't think so.
Yeah. Which would be interesting if they went back and did that, since these are pretty popular.
Yeah, I mean, David Mack did the art in it, which I loved all of David Mack's Daredevil stuff, so that was always kind of nice going back to. But yeah, it was good. I enjoyed it, but
Worth reading?
yeah, worth reading once.
I might have to give it a try then.
Probably not something I'll go back to, but the first read was good enough.
So I just finished this last night. This is a Gotham Central omnibus. This is written by Brubaker, the aforementioned, and also Greg Rucka. So this is, it's always been heralded. Like if you've probably heard of this book before. Have you heard of this book?
Yes.
Okay. So it's about Gotham Central, the police force. And I know you're a big fan of Powers, which is like kind of like follows the police in a superhero world.
Yep.
This one I feel like, because I've read the first couple trades of that back in the day, you lent them to me. I feel this is more, there's less superheroes in this than there were in Powers. Like this feels a lot like Brubaker's Criminal series, but with just enough DC characters in it, just enough Batman appearances and that kind of thing to keep you reminded that this is actually a Batman story. But it's more about the police, and the main characters in the police force are people you might be familiar with, like Renee Montoya is definitely one of the main characters. She was in the Batman animated series and that kind of thing. And I think her character arc is the one that really encompasses the whole thing from beginning to end. But Harvey Bullock makes an appearance in it. Jim Gordon makes one cameo appearance. You would assume it would be a lot of Jim Gordon, but he's not in it quite a lot. But the format's interesting too. So this is like just issues 1 through 40. That's like the easiest omnibus ever. There's no annuals, there's no spin-offs, no crossovers, just 1 through 40. And Brubaker and Greg Rucka, Greg Rucka is also another famous crime comic writer. They took turns. So I forget one of them does a night shift and one of them does a day shift. So like they're both telling like their own individual stories, but they're crossing over a little bit. Like you see the characters cross over as one's clocking out, one's clocking in, kind of thing. But they both have their own little playhouse of characters to play into, and it's not like every other issue. Like it'll be like 3 issues of Rucka doing night shift arc and whatnot. Like the table of contents is actually really good for this for a DC book. But you can kind of see. I know you can't see on camera, but Brian can see. Like they broke it down by arcs. So like that one's 2 issues and that one's 3 issues. So that's nice too, because then you can like, if you have time to sit down and read 3 issues, read 1 arc, you can read that real fast. But it's really good. Like I said, it keeps you grounded enough to remind you that it's a Batman story, or there's a Batman villain will pop up here and there. The first arc is about Mr. Freeze coming in, and he kills one of the cops. He freezes them, and they die. So then you see like the aftermath of the cops having to deal with like one of the partners dying. So it's like, well, you always read the Batman comics, but you never see like the other side of it, like what the police have to deal with, and like also how it affects them emotionally and like the trauma they go through, that kind of thing. This is all of that side, and it's really good. It's really worth reading. I think people have always said that the Gotham TV series, which you watched a little bit of that, didn't you? I watched the first season. They're like, why did they just adapt this instead?
Well, I thought I'd heard rumors that they were going to make, like more recently, have a Gotham Central show.
Which I think it would work, but the things that series ran into, I always heard was that there was getting a lot of pressure to show more villains and show more, hurry up and speed up the process of these origin stories. This would have not worked, I think, in that format, because like I said, there's very little appearances of Batman and the villains, but just enough. So I don't think it would have worked on TV because it feels a lot like watching like a Law and Order SVU kind of thing. Even like the dialogue inside the office of the police department kind of thing, the back and forth banter feels a lot like those shows if you ever watched any of those. But a really well done one.
I've heard good things about this book. I've never actually read any of it, but if you were going to do a book like that, I think Brubaker's like the perfect person.
Yeah,
to...
Brubaker and Rucka for sure. And then Michael Lark does the art for, I think, the first 25 issues, and then some people fill in after that. And he did the art for Brubaker's, I think, Daredevil? Yeah, Brubaker's Daredevil run. So it's really good, though. It's really worth reading, and there's a lot of mystery involved, a lot of detective work if you're into that, too, of them trying to solve mysteries every arc. Yeah, definitely recommend that, though.
Awesome. My next one was a pretty light read. It's Butts and Seats. It's the Tony Schiavone story. This was a Kickstarter, and it's a pretty straightforward biography, going through his time in wrestling, from getting started and being a baseball announcer through AEW. So it was pretty good. Nothing too deep and not a whole lot of road stories. It's mostly just Tony's story, which was really nice because it's a pretty interesting story. He had some ups and downs throughout his life, and I enjoyed it. The one thing that was a little jarring is that like each chapter was done by a different artist. So sometimes it would like take a little while to get back into it, or I'd start really liking somebody and then it would change again. And so that was kind of a bit of a hurdle to get over, but otherwise it was just a really cool story. In the back there were some bonus chapters that had more of like the road stories that you see in a lot of the wrestling comic books, but otherwise it was pretty straightforward and it was good. It had a lot of there's some like him getting together with his wife and that whole relationship, and how there's a little controversy there in the beginning, but how much he really loves his wife comes through in the story too, and it's really cool.
Does he tell the title story? The Butts and the Seats?
It does. Okay. Yeah. That's in there at that point, and yeah, he used it for the title of the book.
I don't think I've heard his perspective of it. That's interesting. Is he a comic book fan?
I don't know.
Because I saw this Kickstarter come about, and it was just interesting that this was the format.
Yeah, I'm not sure if he is or not.
Because you think he would, a lot of wrestling personalities have come out with biographies, like just written biographies, but he chose comics, which is awesome.
Yeah, it doesn't go too deep into any aspect of his life. It's a very light version of a biography, but it was good to read.
So, I read Batman Year One again. I've read this before. This is the first time reading in this format, though, which is great. So one of my latest reading projects, I was getting through these reading projects of things, is related to Batman. So one thing that annoys me about comic book fans or what have you is when people say, like, I don't like the depiction of Batman. That's not who Batman really is. When, if we're being honest, Batman's been depicted for 80 years in a million different ways, different formats, he's been doing goofy stuff, so it's like, you can say that's not your favorite version of Batman, but to say that's not Batman, that's kind of silly to me. So one thing, and I don't know what the goal of this project is, I just wanted to explore all the different versions of Batman. So that's where Gotham Central came in. It's kind of like someone else's perspective of Batman within the story. I'm reading some Golden Age Batman. It's been my bedtime reading. I don't have to, I've been reading on my iPad. First time reading that material. And then I've been reading like something like Batman 66. I'm going to reread that omnibus. Brian has that in the background over there. There's all these different versions of Batman. It's my goal. I'm going to just explore him because that kind of description of like that's not who he really is. That's not a great depiction of him. Works for most superheroes that have been around for 60 to 80 years, right? But Batman, I feel like it's the most varied in how he's been depicted over the years. So I don't know what the goal is. I'm just wanting to read all the different versions of him and then maybe come up to my own conclusion later. But this is a great place for anybody to start. I think this is a masterpiece. One thing I am also working on this year is I'm trying to put together a list of the top 10 greatest comic books ever. Like, obviously that's very snooty and pretentious to come up with, but it will be my own list of my own opinion, and I want it to be like things that were like, my criteria is to like something that was groundbreaking, something that changed the genre, something that brought something new to the medium, something that sold well, and those kinds of things. This one is definitely a contender. You've read this, right?
Yes.
Okay, I was gonna say. I think you might have even passed this on to me years and years ago. But this is the absolute format. Have you seen this format?
No, not of this book.
Okay, so there's 2 books here, obviously.
Yes.
So David Mazzucchelli, who's like the just incredible artist on this, they've reprinted it a million times in a million different formats, and this is what you get in this book. The second, or book 1, I guess. They actually list the book. Is this printing? That coloring process. So anytime you get a trade paperback of Batman Year One, you're going to get something that looks close to this. It even has like, these were added in, these weren't in the single issues, like these newspaper clippings, you get the covers, and the coloring is a big thing too. They recolored it all. And David Mazzucchelli's, who would go on to be his wife, Richmond Lewis, did the original coloring and then I guess the recoloring for the trade paperback. So if you've ever read Year One, you're more than likely to have read this version of it with its coloring. But they also included this, which is like a total facsimile edition of the original comic book. And it's just only 4 issues. It was like Batman 404 through 407 is what it took place in.
It's so hard. Like, it's such an important Batman book, and then you think it's only 4 issues. Like, what? Like,
I know.
That was such a pivotal story. It feels
Right.
like it should have been so much more.
And it just took place, like it wasn't like its own miniseries. Like today this would have been Batman Year 1, 1 through 4.
Right.
But it just took place in the middle of Batman 404 through 407. But this is, like, amazing. I love, and that's another thing, like I talked about earlier, different printing of comic books and stuff like that. I love this new thing, and this came out years and years ago. Tashin's doing this with Marvel now, but this is like total facsimile, so like you can feel like the cover is like glossy, and then it's newsprint, and even has like the newsprint like markings from like the printing process on here, and the original coloring. So that's the important thing too, and the letters pages and everything. So this is literally they took like the 4 issues and bound it together in this book, but then made it oversized because it's absolute format. But it's just really like great to read it in this original format as if I was getting them monthly off the stands. But just to show you, this is like one really easy example. I'll show you the different coloring. It's like the last page of one of these issues.
So you have the same book in 2 different formats. And it's cool to have that as like a reference, but if you were to just grab this off the shelf and read one, would you ever read both? Like, isn't there going to be like one?
Right, one that I prefer.
Yeah.
I think I would, this might be my preferred one, the original, but I think I would read it in that one. And the reason why I say that is because I like to read comics in different formats, different ways that are printed as well. So like, one thing I always do is I read Watchmen like once a year, but I always try to read it in a different way. So one way I want to read it is in the original issue. So I think it just depends on what I want to read. But here's an easy example of like the coloring. Like you can see when they recolored, they put a whole different pattern on the bed. Then on that one, there's like nothing on the bed there. So it was like something that, and it was the original colorist and artist making these choices when they went back in, trying to make it like a book that you'd want on the shelf of a bookstore kind of thing. So it wasn't like years later. Like I know people have an issue with the Alan Moore Swamp Thing omnibuses or absolutes, where Steve Oliff went back and like recolored everything to his liking. And Steve Oliff was not on the original project at all. This is the original project, so that's kind of cool too. But this is kind of pricey for only being 4 issues. I think it's like $125 cover price. But I think this is the format to own. Even the back too of they have like all the scripts, like the entire scripts and thumbnails from David Mazzucchelli, which is fun to read. And then this was a cool thing, which I know you appreciate this. The letters pages. I always like to read letters pages because they're like, I say they're like Twitter from back then. It's like getting the actual real in-time perspective of people.
But it wasn't in time. It was always like 2 months out. Right?
Okay, but like more than like hearing what people in 2023 say about Batman Year One. But I also like to look to if there's famous people in them. In this last issue, I can't find the. Oh, here it is. Look who wrote a letter.
No way. That's
Walt,
awesome.
Walt Flanagan from Kevin Smith and Clerks fame.
That's a long letter too.
I know. He was, like, it's really long. And obviously he drew Batman for Kevin Smith's run, and he's a huge Batman fan. Kevin Smith cites him as the one that got him into Batman, because Kevin Smith said, like, before meeting Walt, his version of Batman was the 60s version.
Yeah.
And then Walt was like, no, like you have to read Year One and Dark Knight Returns and all this other stuff. But he writes in here, it's like, I've been reading comics for 30 years and I've never written a letter, and I've been trying to fight myself from reading this letter. So like the first 4 issues came out, he was like, I'm going to write a letter, this is so good. And he finally did, and it's in here. So, Walt Flanagan letter. It's kind of cool.
It's very cool.
So Batman Year One, starting this Batman project that doesn't really have a goal in mind, but
Just reading Batman.
just reading Batman comics.
Well, unplanned, but to stick with that theme, my next book is Joker.
And I haven't read this one, so this might have to fit into mine.
Yeah, so this is one of the Black Label books. This fits very well into like the Dark Knight movies. That very has the same. I mean, you can tell from the Joker on the cover. It works in very well there. The whole story premise is silly, like any other comic book. Really, they let Joker out again. You know, maybe we don't do that.
Maybe we just keep him in there.
But yeah, it's a lot of street level crime. Like he's going back to take over his territory and his gangs and stuff again. It's super cool. I loved it. I think this is in like a bigger hardcover version as well. But
Yeah, I think so. And these Black Label books, because they're either in 2 different formats. They're like in a square magazine sized or comic book sized.
yeah, the magazine side, I don't know. I don't like them because they don't fit on my shelf right, and it just bothers me.
Don't you have Dead Earth? Wonder Woman Dead Earth?
I don't.
Oh, okay. I thought you had that one.
No.
You should read Dead Earth. Off topic, but the same guy that did Murder Falcon.
Okay.
Did Wonder Woman Dead
Yeah,
Earth.
Murder Falcon's awesome. I love
Yeah.
Murder Falcon. But yeah, so that was. I think this might have been the first Black Label book I read. I think I've read a couple since then, like small ones. But yeah, super good. Enjoyed that a lot. Then on the lighter side of, I guess, superheroes, but it's a duck hero, the Duck Avenger. So I picked this one up kind of on a whim because I was waiting for the new Darkwing Duck books to come out. I thought this would hold me over, and I enjoyed it quite a bit. It was very good. This is obviously not Darkwing Duck, it's Donald as his superhero, the Duck Avenger. But there's 2 more trades of this that I want to get, and also want to learn more about the history of the book and where it came from. Because this wasn't originally released in the U.S. I think it was in France. I'm not sure.
Can I say that?
Yeah. I think it was in France originally, but I need to do more research on it and be more knowledgeable. But it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it a lot. It's kind of a light Batman type influences, where he has a lot of gadgets and gizmos and Uncle Scrooge's money, or not really his money, but his what money can buy that makes him a superhero.
I was hoping Disha would tell us. So this was originally published as Duck Avenger issues 0-2.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was in France, but
Do you know like what time period? It looks pretty new.
yeah, it looks really new. The colors and everything look pretty modern.
This looks awesome though.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. So this one, and this collects 3 or 4 books, and it must have been pretty high page count per book, and where the story breaks and stuff. I mean, it was pretty far into the book before there was a story break.
Which also might be a sign of it coming out in France, because in Europe they're like the Reckless books. It's more popular to do like a full OGN rather than single issues in Europe. So.
But it's really good. There's alien species that comes down, and he's fighting these aliens, and it's a whole little intergalactic meets ground level superhero type thing.
It was the colorist is named Disney Italia. Yeah, this has to be a European. Oh, 1996 right there.
There we go.
I've never heard of this. I'm intrigued.
Yeah, so it was a lot of fun. I'm going to track down the other 2.
Yeah.
I think they just recently went out of print, so you can still kind of find them. But
I still want to hunt those down because I love duck comics. So
yeah, this was a really good one. Uncle Scrooge is just kind of like a background character more than anything. He appears in there, but it's really about the Duck Avenger.
So that came out too, like after Darkwing Duck existed.
Yes. Yeah.
It was 96.
Yeah.
Interesting. I wonder if they just didn't have the license for Darkwing Duck and they.
Well, I think this character actually. This is the New Adventures.
Oh, okay.
So I think the character of Donald as a superhero, I don't think he was always called Duck Avenger, but I think he is around previously. But again, I need to do some research and learn all that info. But yeah, maybe once I get all 3 books and I've learned a little bit more, maybe I'll do a video on the Duck Avenger.
Yeah.
When I'm more knowledgeable about things. And my final big read for the month is The World of Black Hammer. So Taylor got me into Black Hammer last year. Was it last year? Yeah, so I burned through all the main title Black Hammer library editions really quick. I love them. And I bought the World of Black Hammers, but for whatever reason, they just sat on my shelf. Like, I took a break and never got to them. So I made it a point with my reading. You know, I've had these things sitting there and I keep saying, I want to read these, and finally did. So I read the first 2 library editions this month. The first one is super cool. I liked it a lot. This one collects the Sherlock Frankenstein and Dr. Andromeda. So the Sherlock Frankenstein I thought was super cool. Really enjoyed it with all the connections from the other characters and just solidifying that background. And then the Dr. Andromeda I didn't expect to like as much, but some of like, I don't know, that story really pulled on some emotional heartstrings there, and I loved it. Like, super thrilled. Getting back into the world of Black Hammer, literally, figuratively, was awesome.
I have to like re-remember things. I've read this so long ago. So is it David Rubin's the artist on? Okay, yeah, David Rubin does Sherlock Frankenstein. How'd you like his art?
I liked it. I loved it.
I freaking love his art.
Yeah, it's really cool. It works perfectly for a Dr. Frankenstein type story.
Yeah.
And that too, it was really cool because now in the world of Black Hammer books, you're playing with the timeline a little bit more, and you're like going around and like really developing this whole universe that's been created, and super awesome. Very well done.
Yeah, Dr. Andromeda used to be called Dr. Star, you know that?
I did not know that.
Yeah, so they even got so far as to releasing the trade paperback for Dr. Star, and then after that, the copyright, I guess there's somebody owns copyright to Dr. Star. So they had to change the name when it went to library edition. So if you have any of those single issues or the trade paperback, it might be worth something. I don't know. But these are awesome. David Rubin, the reason why I brought him up, he did a really fun series with Matt Kent that I think you'd enjoy because it deals with magic a lot. But I know you're not a huge fan of magic in comics.
Yeah.
But the great thing about it is neither is Matt Kent. So the whole story of Ether is Matt Kent exploring the whole point of magic and why it like doesn't make sense in stories, but how it can make sense. So like the character, the main protagonist in the comic, actually also hates magic. He's like a scientist, so he's kind of exploring magic throughout the whole thing too. So it's really an interesting perspective for people that don't like magic in comics.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like magic in comics. You're absolutely right, but I am intrigued with the Strange Academy books.
Oh,
I keep looking at them and like, I think I might like that, but I've been hesitant. I haven't got into them.
They just released that in a 12-issue. They don't call it a complete collection, but it includes the first 12 issues in an actual full-size trade
In that
paperback.
format, though, like the complete collection style.
Yeah. So because they released originally in those digest-sized, the smaller trades that they do, and then they released the oversized hardcover that only does it for 6 issues, and then this is the first time it's actually been released as a normal trade paperback. But it just came out, I think, last week.
And then I moved on to number 2 in the world of Black Hammer. This book, while the first book was just like an absolute home run for me, this book took a lot more work. Like, I had to work a little bit more on this, which I was a little surprised because the Black Hammer 45 story was the first one. Yeah. So Black Hammer 45 I thought was going to be right up my alley, and I was going to really like a lot. And I did, but I had to like work through it a bit more. And that was the Matt Kent art.
Yeah, Matt Kent.
So the art there, I don't think is going to be for everybody, the Matt Kent art.
How did you feel about it, though?
It took me a little bit to get into, but then once I got into the groove, I appreciated it, and I was good with it. The story, again, I don't. It took work to like get into it, but then once I was into that world and really reading it, enjoying it, I didn't want it to end when it ended. Like, I was ready to keep going. So that's a good thing, right? Because I didn't want it to stop. But it did take a little bit to get into, and I've read some other stuff with Matt Kent's art, and the same thing. Like, I have to kind of work through it a little bit, and then I begin to appreciate what's going on there a little bit more. So that was the first one, Black Hammer 45. Then the Quantum Age. The Quantum Age is not necessarily something that I would usually enjoy that much. With, we went into the future a bit more. It's kind of spacey and stuff. But then we got into like the last act of that story, and where all the puzzle pieces started fitting together a little bit, and with the characters that we've known and things that have taken place. And it really paid off in the end, so much so that I look at it and like, oh wow, that was really cool.
Totally off topic. But I just noticed, one thing I noticed on these is that Oh, well, there's a typo there. Multivericity. Interesting. That's not what I was going to point out. But on the backs of these, they always have like the blurbs, and they're always perfect 5 out of 5s or 10 out of 10s. That's the first one I noticed has a 9 out of 10 from Multivericity. Sorry, that's just something I noticed. Normally the perfect scores.
Yeah, 9 out of 10 is not a bad score.
I know, but they could have let that one off. We have a perfect streak going on here. So you enjoyed the Black Hammer 45?
I did, with the caveat of it took me a little bit to get into.
Because of the art or the art and story?
Both.
Okay.
Yeah, both. So the story initially, like, I knew it was in the world of Black Hammer, so I was like, okay, we're telling this like historical story, and that's cool, but when's the stuff going to start happening?
Mm-hmm.
And then the art too, is like, working through getting into it, like combined, I think just a little bit of a struggle, but once I was in there, it was awesome. It was really good.
So you have 3 and 4 still?
Yep. So those are going to be, I'm going to be tackling those in February.
And then 5 comes out soon, which is the Black Hammer Visions, I think it is.
Okay. And which one has Skull Diggers at 4?
Yeah, I think it's the most recent one. 4. Is that one you're most excited to read?
Yeah.
He's a cool looking character.
Looking forward to that.
Once I saw that character, I was... And then it has the Unbelievable Unteens, I think, in it too. Yeah. Which is fun.
Which leads directly to what I want to talk about next. What are you going to be reading in February?
Oh, okay. More Batman.
More Batman?
So I think on my... I also have Grant Morrison's Invisibles on my docket. I've already started that omnibus, but I didn't bring it because I'm only like 12 issues into it. That's like a big 1,500-page omnibus, too. Have you read Grant Morrison? Any Grant Morrison comics?
Some, but not a lot.
Okay, so this has been like a recent thing for me the last couple years. He's known as like when you hear Grant Morrison comics, they are mostly known for comics that are like really out there, like make you think and like maybe not understand really exactly 100% what's going on, which can turn people off, or maybe you have to read it a couple more times. So I always kind of like avoided Grant Morrison comics because I was like, I get that kind of those kinds of stories from like Alan Moore, and I'm not always into those kinds of things. Especially in my early comic book reading, I was mostly into like grounded superheroes like Batman, Daredevil, those kinds of things, Spider-Man. But in my later years, I find myself wanting to read more out there kind of comics. And so Grant Morrison, I finally dipped my toes in last year. And where I started was reading their memoir, Super Gods, where I listened to it, an audiobook. And it's great because it's like their memoir, but it also tells the history of comics and interspersed into it. And Grant Morrison grew up in Scotland and has a really interesting story. Like his dad was like part of the Peace, I don't think Peace Corps, but he was a pacifist that was like into like trying to fight all these wars that people are into, trying to like, he's very much into peace. So his dad was like until he's all like finding out, trying to hunt down where all these like bombs were and trying to like, I don't know, get rid of people that are building bombs and those kinds of things. And so you hear a lot about that in their memoir, but Invisibles kind of takes place, or kind of like deals with those themes. Invisibles is like this clandestine group that is really much under the radar, but they go around and like fight all these big world things. So you hear these big events on the news, the Invisibles will be like behind the scenes trying to like prevent it from happening or stop it or whatever. There's a lot of things, this was like in the 90s, the Vertigo series, and there's a lot of things that I guess the Matrix movie like blatantly ripped and stole from the Invisibles. I guess Morrison said like when they saw it in the theaters, they were like, they just stole everything from my comic book. It's kind of like that scene from the Tom Scioli Kirby book when he's like watching Star Wars, and he stands up and he's like, what the hell? That's how I imagine Morrison, but so it's very much out there, and it's a lot to grasp. But Super God's a memoir. If anybody's trying to get into Morrison, I recommend listening to that because I feel like it really provides the perspective of Morrison and what goes into their mind when they're writing comics and what they want from comics and what they expect from comics. And there's plenty of things out there that like I was reading Morrison's JLA run, and it's very much just a straight superhero comic. And I kind of didn't enjoy it. I was like, I kind of want the weird out there kind of things. I feel like you have more to tell. I feel like this is just like him, or them like just coaxing it off in an afternoon, like, okay, I'll write a superhero comic and then let me get into the good stuff. Yeah. but I think Super Gods is a great gateway, and then I think also Morrison's Animal Man run, I think is another good gateway. It's a CED-less character that Morrison kind of grabbed, and it starts off like a traditional superhero comic, but with like you see a lot of his family life and kind of stuff, and then it builds into this crazy like metafictional story later into the comic. But I feel like that's like a good gateway because it starts off like a normal comic book and then like starts to explore these weird ideas from Morrison. But anyways, in the last 2 years, I've read a lot of Morrison. I've been trying to get into it, into a lot of their works, and I've enjoyed most everything I've read. I think the JLA might be an exception. Invisibles I'm really enjoying, but I'm trying to take my time with it because it is a lot of thinking, a lot of trying to figure it out. So that's on my docket. And then as far as Batman goes, I'm going to continue reading Golden Age Batman, and I think I have the Grant Morrison, the aforementioned. He has 3 omnibuses that I have of his Batman run, or their Batman run, that I want to read. That apparently, here's another thing that I hate about superhero comics. I've just now learned that, so Morrison has 3 Batman omnibuses, and then Scott Snyder has 2 Batman omnibuses, and then there's also this Batman and Robin omnibus from Peter J. Tomasi and Patrick Gleason. They all intermingle and happen at the same time. So if you're truly going to read them like in order, you're going to be like picking through different omnibuses. I'm going to say screw that, and I'm just going to read just Morrison. I think I'm reading the Tomasi Gleason one on digitally because I don't want to buy the omnibus, but I do want to read it because that one explores a lot of like Batman as Bat Dad, because Robin in that one is Damian. So, and I think Damian's introduced in the Morrison run, but so it's like Damian's like this 12-year-old that's like disgruntled and hates his, like doesn't want to listen to his dad, and he wants to be an assassin, and he's like, why are you teaching me all this stuff? So anybody that's been a dad of disgruntled kids probably can relate to that a little bit. But and then Snyder's run I want to read because it has like the Court of Owls run that people always talk about. But in the Morrison one also, Final Crisis happens, which is this big event that happened in DC. And you're supposed to read that in between. I'm going to say screw that as well. And if it doesn't make sense to me in 3 omnibuses, then it's DC's fault. But I think those 2 are my big reading projects.
Okay. Yeah, for sure. I'm going to be reading the other 2 World of Black Hammers, and I'm going to get back into the Peter David Hulk omnis. Volume 3, I think, is where I'm at now. So I'm going to start getting into Volume 3 and reading through it.
And Volume 5 comes out soon, right?
Sometime this year. I don't know how soon.
Are you getting that one?
Yes.
Are you getting the Maestro one too?
Probably.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, all kinds of Peter David stuff I'll be getting this year. Do you have a favorite pick for the month of things that you've read?
Well, shoot. I mean, Batman Year One. It's like I said, I read Watchmen once a year. Typically, I might have missed a couple of years, but if I were to do like my best 10 reads of the year every year, Watchmen's probably gonna be in there, so I don't really want to include it.
Yeah.
I'd probably say that's the case for this because this is a reread. So by default, Batman Year One, and like Hero's a reread too. So, but I want to eliminate those. I want to disqualify them from the ranking here. But I'm gonna go Pink Lemonade.
Okay.
Again, I want everyone to read this and try it out. The trade paperback is gonna have 6 issues in it. I think it's only $20 when it comes out. It'll be this summer. I want everyone to try it out. We read all these dark, gritty comics. Like we read that like Watchmen and Dark Knight Returns came out in the 80s, and everything after that. Everyone that read that when it came out wanted to make dark, gritty comics. I love fun comics too. Fun, colorful, just Saturday morning cartoon kind of doesn't. There's not a lot of thinking involved sometimes, but
I mean, it's kind of like any story though. Like you have to have the other side of that coin to be able to appreciate.
That's true.
Things too.
Yeah.
Like if you don't have any of the brightness, then you go to read all the dark, and it's just same.
That's a good point. But yeah, so fun comics, and it's not like I don't want to say it's like 2-dimensional to where there's no thinking involved at all. I mean, there's a lot of like meta elements too, where it's talking about one of the things too in the story is like they're trying to make a Pink Lemonade movie off of her likeness, so she's trying to fight off the actress that's I think it's on the covers. No, it's not. The actress that's like they're making a whole movie that's not anything like the actual Pink Lemonade. So that's like one of the meta elements too. Is if you're like a writer that have had like things that of your stories taken or people adapted it and adapted it in a completely wrong way or kind of thing. So it's not like it's just two-dimensional, but it's just a fun comic.
Yeah. My favorite read of the month was Reckless. I am super excited, and I'm kind of trying to tame my excitement and not read through all of it at once and spread it out. But looking forward to reading more.
One thing you didn't talk about, which I wonder if you related to this character, Ethan Reckless lives in an abandoned movie theater.
Yeah, that was super cool. I don't know if I related to it, but...
Oh, okay. I didn't know if it was like a... Because Brian used to work in movie theaters. I didn't know if you had like this... Sometimes you have this dream of like, man, I'd love to just own a movie theater and just sit in and watch whatever movies I wanted.
No, I mean, I can't relate to it in that I've never lived inside of a movie theater. But I did really appreciate those scenes of like, and imagining what it would be like. And on that same front, Kevin Smith recently bought his own movie theater. And during the filming of Clerks 3, he was living in it.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so he has some stories there that are really... I think I saw him on YouTube. They were like some of his road stories where he was doing different things. But he mentioned like... So there's basically an apartment in the movie theater that he was living in. And some of the teenagers that were working in the movie theater had to be warned that Kevin's up there. Because sometimes in the middle of the night you'd be like, man, I'm thirsty. Oh, there's drinks downstairs. Like his back door went down behind the concession stand, so he'd just pop out and scare people.
Oh, that's funny.
But yeah, just the idea of living in a movie theater is really cool. But yeah, so that was awesome. Thank you for being on. This was a lot of fun. Hopefully my reading volume continues through the rest of the year, but I look forward to doing more videos like this. And you're welcome to come back anytime.
Absolutely.
As long as we can get it scheduled and get it done.
I think videos like this also kind of are like a good checkpoint for you to like have a goal in mind. Where, well, I have to make that video, so I have to read something.
Right. It keeps the motivation going, and that was part of my goal. I mean, at the beginning of the year, I put together a big list of all these books that I've been saying I'm going to read and I haven't read. So here's my list. I'm going to start checking them off. But then having something like this to check in along the way, like holding me accountable, is very useful. So yeah, hope you enjoyed it. If you want to talk more about any of these books, go ahead and comment down below. I definitely wouldn't mind going into more detail on any of them. And check out Taylor on Taylor Talks Comics and some of his videos where he goes pretty deep into some books and it's very informative. But otherwise, thanks for watching this long. If you have watched this long, like, subscribe. Thank you.